Welcome back to 90s Punk Rock Covers. My name is Sam, and in today's video I am going to go a different direction and talk about cameras and photography and my favorite camera of all time, the Leica QP. If you haven't followed me on Instagram, then you have probably figured out by now that photography is another big passion of mine. I picked up my first DSLR camera over 10 years ago, and ever since then I've been in love with photography. Just to give you guys a quick background story, I started a craft beer blog called Beer in Focus. Around the time I got my first camera, my friends and I would cover beer events, I would write articles and photograph beer, and had a really great time doing it. And that is basically what helped me understand and learn photography. Now, fast forward to now, I mainly focus my Instagram account to be more of a personal curated gallery of guitar gear and the occasional product collaboration with brands. So in a nutshell, that is how I started in this whole creative process. So the Leica QP. For those of you that know about cameras, you have probably owned, seen, or heard about these cameras. In guitar terms, I would compare them to a custom shop guitar brand. They are expensive, could not necessarily be all that different than a more affordable brand, but there's something very intangible about them that a lot of photographers really look for. I like to think of it as feel, functionality, looks, which is why it makes this brand so special and sought after by people, but also disliked by some because of its price and some creeple features as opposed to a more modern DSLR or mirrorless camera in the market. The original Q camera came out in 2015, so this is considered very old technology in today's standards, and it originally retailed for $5,000. This version of the QP, which came out late in 2018, the main difference between the original Q and this one is this one has a matte black finish, an upgraded shutter button, and a redesigned on and off switch similar to the Leica M10 cameras. But other than that, they are really essentially the same camera. Now, as far as specs go, you have a full frame 24 megapixel CMOS sensor with an attached 28mm Summilux f1.7 aperture lens, a great autofocus system, electronic viewfinder, in-body stabilization, and limited touchscreen functionality. As far as video specs, there's not really much to talk about here. This camera maxes out at 1080p video, up to 30 frames per second. Not very impressive in today's standards. However, you really wouldn't buy this camera for video. This is honestly just a photography camera. Now, this is why most people get frustrated with Leica, basically a $5,000 camera with very limited options. However, if you care to put all of that aside and just focus on the craftsmanship, the image quality, and handle of this camera once you use it, then you realize how much of a powerhouse this small camera really is. Now, this is a full frame camera in such a small body. The closest camera with similar specs is the Sony RX1R, which comes in at a lower price point, but if you care for a more minimalist design and ergonomics, then you probably will want to go with this camera as opposed to the Sony, in my personal opinion. Now, as ridiculous as the Leica camera prices are, their lenses are just astronomical. But let's put this into perspective. A similar Leica lens alone would cost you around $4,900, just the lens without a body. That is for a lens that you would use on their M series cameras, which the body alone would cost you another $8,000 brand new. So if you look at it that way, then I would say this camera is a bargain. Not to mention that you could probably find it used for about half the price of what it retailed for originally. Maybe even more depending on the condition, etc. So why did I pick up this camera in the first place? For one, I always wanted to own a Leica but wasn't ready to go all in into such an expensive camera ecosystem. Not to mention, I rely mainly on autofocus and wanted something discreet and portable for travel, which is something my wife and I do a lot of. Basically a compact camera that I could easily take with me everywhere and not think so much about what lenses to take or what accessories I need, and just focus on photography. The build quality is amazing. All Leica cameras are handmade and assembled in Germany, and their attention to detail and quality is what they are really known for. Ergonomically, the camera feels great in my hand. It's small, but not to the point where you feel it's gonna fall off your hand or something. I added a thumbs up grip, which really helps the handling of the camera. So to me, it's just the perfect solution for travel and street photography if that is your thing. As I mentioned earlier, the minimalist design of the Leica cameras is one of the main reasons that attracted me to the brand in the first place. With only the necessary buttons on the back, without any unnecessary distractions, you have full control of everything, including your aperture ring, your shutter speed, your exposure compensation, your ISO dial, basically everything that you need in order to make a good photograph. The menus are pretty slick and minimalist. It offers a little bit of customization within the menu, but otherwise it's very simple. This camera also has a macro mode within the lens, which works really great and comes in handy when doing product photography. The autofocus is pretty quick and snappy, and it really works as it should. It is not in the same caliber as a modern DSLR or mirrorless camera, but it does the job. I tend to shoot in the 1-point AF setting and basically move my focus point around or simply lock focus and then recompose my image. Lately I have been using the manual focus, which is super smooth, and I use the EVF magnification and focus peaking in order to nail that critical focus. Now, speaking of the EVF, it's super sharp and bright and works extremely well outdoors, and definitely comes in handy to get a preview of how your final image will look like. All of the dials are super tactile and feel strong with no cheap parts spare on this camera. My only complaint is I wish the on and off switch was a little bit sturdier, like on the M series, meaning it's a little bit easy to accidentally turn the camera on or off, or even switch it to single or continuous modes. But other than that, I really have nothing else to complain about the camera. The 28mm Summilux lens is beautiful, and it's the perfect travel lens, sharp from corner to corner, and even at f1.7 it's super sharp. I love shallow depth of field, and even though this lens is more of a wide angle lens, you can still get some really beautiful autofocus elements in your image. Do I wish this lens was a 35mm instead? Maybe, but that's just my personal preference. I think I tend to see more within that 35mm frame line. However, this camera has a pretty cool feature which sort of cheats out your local focal distance into either a 35 or a 50mm field of view using an internal punch-in or crop mode. Now, it won't really make your final image look like it was taken in those two focal distances, but it does help you compose your image as if it was the lens that you were shooting with by using the frame lines on your EVF or your LCD screen. Now, this camera is out of production now and was recently replaced with the Q2, which has a bigger and newer 47 megapixel sensor, 4K video, and weather sealing, which are great features to have on such an expensive camera. But to me, it didn't really justify the extra $2,000 it would have cost me as opposed to my older yet capable QP. In the end, price and specs aside, the best camera is the one you carry with you all the time, whether it's your iPhone, your DSLR, your mirrorless camera, or this Leica QP. This camera always inspires me to shoot, even the small moments around my daily life. It just brings me joy, and that is what makes a camera special, in my opinion. So who is this camera for? Well, if you don't care about the premium Leica prices and you want convenience, portability, build quality, and a full frame sensor with amazing image quality and optics in such a small package, then look no further. I would suggest to go for a used original Leica Q or even this QP and save yourself a lot of money going that route. But if you want a modern Leica with all of the new tech and bells and whistles and can afford it, then I would choose the new Q2. All right guys, this is it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed a different kind of content. I really wanted to start doing this sort of photography videos in the future, so if this was helpful and entertaining to you, don't forget to like the video, drop me a comment, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram, where I pretty much share a lot of my pictures using this Leica QP. All right guys, so thanks a lot for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Cheers.